Moving on, and last week we spoke with Dr. Ken Hellevang. He's an agricultural engineer with North Dakota State University Extension and an expert when it comes to grain storage. This week we continue our conversation and begin with why it's always a good idea to store grain in a structure that's been built specifically for storing grain.
Well, the strength of the building was really the first thing that I encourage people to think about. Most of our buildings are not designed to handle the load of the grain pushing on the wall. So we need to verify whether we can actually pile grain on the wall. It's more difficult to fill and unload a building, and we still need to think of aeration. We need to have air exchange so we can cool that pile to winter storage temperatures and control that temperature, maintain the right moisture contents, similar to what we would with any other storage.
And any advice for farmers on what they can do to reduce the possibility of insect infestation in stored grain?
With insects, the first thing is making sure that the storage is clean to start out with. There should not be any leftover grain that's in that bin or structure. We recommend anything that's going into storage to have a grain protectant on that grain and applied to the bin wall. And then controlling the temperature. Controlling the temperature, I think, is the single, again, point that I would emphasize. We can really control insect infestations by controlling the grain temperature, cooling it down for winter storage.
And I was speaking with one of our market analysts one time a few weeks back, and she mentioned that the U.S. has a shortage of grain bins. Do you see that as a major issue, especially with some of the excess grain that has been stored up over the past couple seasons?
Absolutely. We have a recent stock report indicating how much grain is stored both on farm and off farm, and it shows that we have a lot of grain in storage already. And that's before we start our corn and soybean harvest. There just are not enough bins that are available. The window to build a bin is rapidly passing, and so we really are thinking of alternative storage options to get us through at least this fall and part of our storage season.
And our last question, then we'll let you go. What are some of the top questions that farmers ask you when it comes to grain storage, and what do you tell them to some of those most asked questions?
Well, I get asked kind of a whole variety of questions. It's a little difficult to pick what might be the most common question, but many people are looking at, how do I aerate this grain? How much fan is required? And sometimes it's surprising that if we're putting dry grain into a storage and we're just running air to control the temperature, we can do that with a fairly small fan. Just a 2-3 horse fan can aerate probably 50,000 bushels of grain. And so frequently people think that it needs to be a huge fan, and it doesn't need to be a very large fan. Now, if we're trying to dry the grain, take off a couple, 3 points of moisture, that's where we're going to need a lot of airflow. And many of our bins today really are not designed to air dry in that bin. So they need to investigate whether drying in the bin is an option that's available and really look at selecting a fan that's appropriate for the job.